And we are live. Hello, this is the Tabletop Stream, and we have today with us Serbs, Gwen, Gurmachu, and Sour.
Woo!
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Ah, got shot.
Salutations.
Before we begin, I have a statement to make for the sake of full disclosure. Streams live on air will continue to run ad-free, but streams recorded to my channel have been monetized through ads provided by Google. I have no control over the content of these advertisements. As such, they are not representative of this channel's content. Due to the time and effort put into the production of the streams, I do require minimal compensation. For those who do not want ads as part of their viewing experience, while I have added YouTube's website to my own whitelist, I will not discourage the use of ad block while viewing my channel. Just want to get that out of the way, and you're free to make the shill accusation now. Moving on.
God damn, John.
Bloody.
Would you get that written by a lawyer?
Yeah,
What the-
it's.
What?
I'd like to refer you to Section 3, Paragraph 8 of the I'm a shill clause. And
Yeah, but anyway, onto the subject of tabletop. So, my first question for everybody is, how did you guys first start getting into the genre, and what were your experiences and the like?
Someone
Who
has
wants
to go
to
first.
first? Well, I got involved with it because my husband made me. It's like, play this or else. I do like board games and I do like RPGs, but the first RPG I've ever played, if you really want to know, is Dark Heresy? Or was it Warhammer Fantasy? I think at the same time I played them. But yeah, I really traditional games, tabletop community. I really like how tabletop community does reviews. I just love the community, and I've been in it ever since, let me think, 2009.
Sounds good. Serps?
Yeah.
I had no friends in school. So when I first got my Ultramarines Codex, I just decided to become a nerd. I've been playing. I played 40k for quite some time, then Warhammer, then got into all various different board games. I still quite like the Cthulhu type, mythology type based games, and I recently am quite active in the War Machine community, both internationally and in the UK. And I also play deck building card games as well.
Excellent. Gwen? Or
So
Gurmachu?
I've been playing tabletop gaming since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I inherited a bunch of first and second edition books, so I picked them up and I studied them, and I ran games. Also, my half-brother, who just going to say is kind of illiterate, offered to let me play in his Shadowrun game. But I was only allowed to play for a little while because it turned out that I had better understanding of the setting and the rules than he did, and that's why I wanted to play. And he didn't like all my questions, and he also didn't like that as a little kid I gave my character art as a background skill, and I drew little pictures and said, this is what my character drew. But I was like 10. I was 10. And I've been reading and playing various tabletop systems, my favorites being Shadowrun for the setting and D&D just for the mechanics. And I've also played Settlers of Catan, Munchkin, all the cheap-ass games that exist because they're great company with a lot of great games.
Yep.
I played Magic the Gathering since I first encountered it. I'm sad I never drew a Lotus, but I did draw some Force of Wills out of packs. That was nice. I'm still waiting for those to be worth $1,000. They're getting up there. And yeah, that's my tabletop gaming history in a nutshell. I've also been working on developing a tabletop RPG system and developing some card games and board games. So there you go. Oh, and I got screwed over by a publisher that was going to publish one of my games, but that's neither here nor there. I'm done. I'm done!
All right. Grimmerchu?
Oh, God, you're all so young.
Aww.
I started in the mid-'80s with fighting fantasy books, and then progressed to Middle-earth role-playing, which was by Iron Crown Enterprises back then. And I haven't stopped since. I play anything and everything. I'm a total game whore. I design stuff, have my own company, Postmortem Studios, and I'm creative director at Chronicle City. So yeah, I've done it all.
All right, sounds good. So, which topic of I might as well tell my experience as well. I'm not very into the tabletop scene myself. My experience has been with mainly card games, particularly Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Harry Potter back in the day. That was back when I was younger. Although to be perfectly honest, I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for like a number of years and last year was like the last time I actually played a game, but that was even online. For me, collectible card games are very, very fun experiences because you get to get involved with the deck building, and you have to know how to play the cards right, and it requires multiple layers of strategy, which it's easy to learn and difficult to master is the expression. Although, in my opinion, in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic the Gathering, they've gotten to a point where the easy to learn part has been kind of forfeit for legalese because they want to keep making the cards more advanced, which in turn makes them a lot more difficult to understand, which I get into some of the details about some of the ridiculous shenanigans with Yu-Gi-Oh! Legalese later. But other than that, I've also played a number of board games. I actually do own Small World, which was a lot of fun, although I've only played it once. But that just goes to show how much limited my experiences are. So I'm approaching this topic mostly as an outsider.
Right. Well, are we going to start with the first sort of conversation then, Peace? Do you have any topics lined up for us, or?
I was hoping to go a little bit more freeform.
Okay.
So, did you lose the game at Small World? Is that what is that why you haven't played it anymore?
I forget who won that one.
We should play together. Small World's awesome.
Yeah,
They
it is
made
pretty
a
awesome.
Steam version of it for
They do.
people that don't have friends in real life.
Oh,
Yep.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
I was mostly going to talk about weird things that I found in tabletop as it pertains to social authoritarians. A couple of months back, I went on RPG.net, and you know me, I found out the hard way that you really can't talk about Gamergame on on RPG.net. They wouldn't allow you to. They'd ban you if you talked about Gamergate, and because they associated it with a hate group. Now, they that's fine. If it's their rules, I'll play by their rules. But about a week or two later, I found another thread in that forum in which they were talking about it. Blatantly, people have been banned from RPG.net for talking about Gamergate. And I thought it was the funniest thing, so I tweet about it, and guess who gets banned from RPG.net?
Oh, God.
Guess, just guess. Come on, Gwen.
It was me! It was obviously me!
But yeah, and I did some, because people were trying to figure out why they were getting banned, or how does this even have to do with anything anyway. It was just odd. So I did a 3-part series about it, about certain academic influences that have been complaining about tabletop for a very, very long time. They complain that it is, from its origins, at least from the original Dungeons & Dragons, that it is sexist, that it is racist, that it is any ism under the sun. And I basically did a 3-part series trying to show their claim and debunk that.
And you know what's interesting about that? If anyone here has read the 5th edition rulebook, it's probably got one of the most inclusive
Yes.
languages in the world. Yet they still, because of D&D's roots, continue, or whatever they perceive in its roots, continue to attack it. And they tried to make it look sexist by supposedly in Consultancy Gate. They trumped up shit to try to make it look sexist.
I agree with that, but if you start from his origins, like they begin with talking about Gary Gygax, and they say that he is basically a biological determinist.
No.
That's how he defined himself, and that influenced everything that he's done. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it was just odd to read something of that sort.
But the weird thing is, there's 1st edition in which women couldn't get as strong as men. But then there's a revised 1st edition just like a couple years later.
There was.
In which they got rid of it.
Yeah.
Because it's a frickin' fantasy game. Who cares?
Well, they do. They obviously. Yeah. That's the thing. They do, and I don't necessarily know how they're going to have to deal with it moving forward.
But they're constantly grasping at straws to make it look like D&D's misogynist, even when D&D has gone out of its way in 5th edition to not seem misogynist for whatever reasons, and it seems super inclusive. And they're still trying to find reasons to hate it and discredit it.
That paragraph that's in the beginning of 5th edition, they still weren't specific enough for people, still didn't cover enough bases. There's still people complaining, oh, my sexuality isn't represented there, how I see myself isn't represented there. But, the book would be twice the size if you covered everything.
Yeah.
So even when you try, you cannot appease these people.
Yeah.
And most people who are any of these things will just, happily modify the game and do their own thing anyway.
Yeah. And there's Consultancy Gate, and I've read people saying, well, someone in their group made house rules that women were weaker than men but had more charisma, and that's sexist, so we need to make the game so that no one can do that. It's like, dude, I don't care what other people... We shouldn't go to people's homes and police how they play games. If the Ku Klux Klan is playing Gamergate, well, fine. I mean, D&D, not Gamergate. Fine. I just want to talk to them and tell them not to play D&D.
That was an awesome Freudian.
Do you want to? It's not my job.
Well,
let's just RPG.
Let me just explain, like, if you could, what Consultancy Gate is, and it just stems from 5th edition. Now, in the beginning of 5th edition, you'll see in the sexual orientation, basically the character in the player's handbook, they describe how you can make up your character. And they say that you can pick any gender, any orientation, anything. It really doesn't matter to them. And it never really did matter to them. They just didn't have it specified in the book. But now they did. So there's a group out there that, I don't know, most people call them social justice warriors. I like to call them social authoritarians because they're putting their hands in my shit. But
yeah.
They're just...
But they go after Zach and Pundit.
They did. And Zach and Pundit, if anybody doesn't know, I believe they are a popular group. Yeah, you can talk.
Shall I cover this?
Yes, please.
I mean, I can cover. Any of us can.
Okay. Well, RPG Pundit is kind of like an online personality that this writer projects. It's kind of like a Colbert figure almost, but not quite as satirical. But yeah, he's been speaking out against the same sort of problems that Gamergate's been facing, but in tabletop games for quite some time.
Yep.
Which is why they don't like him. And Zach is an artist and an occasional porn star who is similarly outspoken, did the I hit it with my axe video thing on the Escapists, runs local D&D with porn stars, and because he's fairly sex positive and his gaming group's all all women, all current or former porn stars. So obviously they hate him. So when D&D 5th came out with this very progressive paragraph in it, but they were credited as consultants because they helped review the texts for 5th edition, people got up in arms about them and started calling them transphobic and homophobic and so on. And whatever the failings of either of these gentlemen, they are not. They have been accused of being.
To summarize what happened just in one sentence, the unifying theme of the whole controversy is that a desire to make it seem like there is a meaningful contradiction between the way Zach and Pundit behave and the inclusive language about gender in the 5th edition rules. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. And they tried to use, and whenever people asked, well, who did they upset? It's like, well, the LGBT people they offended are too scared to say anything. It's like, where did they actually do anything? And they didn't. But because they have a record of kind of being outspoken and getting into internet fights, arguments with people, they do. But, who doesn't? And they tried to just use the fact that no one's probably read all of them, but the reputation of fighting is sort of there, that maybe somehow they offended LGBT people and attacked them personally, and that no one was actually going to try to find where this happened, and they were but no, they never actually did.
Yeah, the accusations are enough for a lot of people.
Yep.
I think. Yeah, they don't have to prove.
And talking about the hate of sex-positive shit, can I just mention the Numerina scandal with Shanna Germain? The whole what the fuck won't they cook?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, where basically Shanna Germain was working on a supplement called, I think it's Love and Sex in the Ninth World, and they started, but they didn't even mention her to begin with. They mentioned Monty Cook, and I've read the whole thing, and it starts, I'm just going to say, the opening paragraph is there are a lot of sexes and sexualities in the Ninth World, given the setting that they're all okay, and this supplement is going to go in and discuss that stuff. And, it does probably the most interesting sex-oriented book on an RPG I've ever read, as it discusses what different kinds of body parts might do as well for different kinds of weird species. So I thought that was interesting, that it was being tackled that way. But then there's this one monster called the Nebovian Wife, which is a construct that pretends to be female and then does horrible, nightmarish things to people. And
Sounds
they
like
decided...
Thanks, Serb.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, Serb. And despite the fact, and they decided to ignore all the sex-positive language, all of the inclusive stuff at the beginning of it about sexuality, and say that this supplement is horrible about women because it's painting all women as being horrible, nightmarish things that want to go and destroy people. Because the Nebovian Wife, why did you create that, Monty Cook? And Sharon Germain says, no, I created it. And she got nothing but death threats for trying to stand up for her product as a sex-positive person.
So basically they're hypocrites.
No, they hate sex-positive.
Yeah.
If you look at Anita, I hate to throw that name out there, she did a whole piece against, she did a whole thing where her and her buddies got together and ripped into, slut walks, which were basically taking the word slut sort of ironically, because they're going, don't just call women sluts because of the way they dress or whatever. I can get behind that. And don't say that women deserve to get raped because they were dressed like sluts. And it's like, all right, that's a good message. But Anita and her ilk, the people who just hate these Puritans, they're Puritans, that they don't like that the word slut was used.
So they brigade against positive social message for the sake because they don't like the language being used. So they're attacking
They don't
the form.
like, they're Puritans. I'm just saying they're Puritans. I'm putting them right now.
They seem to see any form of sex or sexual expression as being necessarily destructive to women, almost.
Yeah.
Or reductive to women, reducing objectification, the same old bollocks.
They're just left-wing Puritans, and they're just as bad as the right-wing Puritans, and I don't like dealing with Puritans.
Is this attitude in any way reflective of the the female players in the tabletop community at all? Like,
It depends where you are. I would say for the most part, no. But there's a very vocal and active minority
That's
that are very much tied in with the indie community, unfortunately.
yeah. I know someone that could probably. I know someone that knows quite a bit of it. I keep meaning to cut up what they said and cut out all their stuff, but yeah. Dip, pasta, someone else talk.
Oh man, I mean, to preface this first, I don't understand where this group comes from. I don't understand why they have the intentions. I don't even understand if their intentions are necessarily noble. If they think they're actually doing me a favor. But if you go back to the foundations, I really don't understand why they pick on Dungeons and Dragons so goddamn much.
I don't think it's just Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's the whole. It's very easy to pick on the culture because it is heavily male orientated, especially in the miniatures area. As I was saying, actually before I came on this stream, I was listening to a podcast from a community one that is in America about why females don't actually get into tabletop, and she said she was looking at this from one of the most sort of objective ways that I could actually say about the argument, because she was saying I'm not putting out any solutions. I'm just pointing out these are the things that are the problems, and not necessarily I don't think there are solutions to a lot of these problems, because it's just men and women have different differences, basically different hobbies and things like that. And one of the main things I think that some of these people do is that they try and portray inclusivity, like it's like why you say Dungeons and Dragons, and I think they try and portray inclusivity because that's what they want to be seen to be doing something correct, but I don't think a lot of them necessarily understand what they are actually doing. Basically, these small groups, what they are trying to argue, they're trying to be seen to be doing the right things, try it and portray themselves in a better light. I think try and dismiss this sort of nerd sort of cred. But there are real issues why some people why especially females don't get involved in some of these sort of projects. So and it was quite an interesting cast, but it might have been a completely aside to what you were going to talk about. But
no, that's actually quite interesting because I read basically a master's thesis on psychologically finding out why women, or how women, when they get into these male-dominated fields, what they actually think. And it was such a weird disconnect between the journalists, the female journalists who talk about tabletop and things of that sort, and actual people who play the game. There was such a big disconnect. The women who actually play the game were like, well, yeah, these cringy moments do happen, because there are some cringe moments. A lot of women complain about creepy DMs. Oh, this situation happened and he wanted to date me, and you could see it on my channel if you want. It's pretty hilarious stuff. But there are situations like that, but most female gamers don't really care.
No, but the thing was that this woman was trying to, and I genuinely believe in some of her points, she was trying to say that miniatures doesn't require a lot of investment, and she was saying the reason that a lot of women don't get involved in tabletop miniatures isn't because it's a male-dominated area. I mean, that can be quite off-putting, but she was putting forward like an idea that there's no role model on the top sort of competitive tables that's a female, because it requires a lot of dedication, basically, to do that. Or the fact that, and this was another point she put forward, that some female nerds are closeted nerds, and the ones that are into sort of like card games and RPGs and things like that, they're people that have properly identified themselves as that. But there are some that are out there that only particularly like one aspect of the thing, so they can't relate with the community when they come into it. And because males have a lot of crossover from comic books to all different sort of nerdy things, they can't relate to and form friendships in that community. There have started to be more examples, and they gave examples of people that are involved in the community, like Meg Maples, who does all the painting. She's a fantastic artist. And another woman that organises all the tournaments, and she's a fantastic organiser of high-level tournaments. But they don't play the game anymore, and they're not competitive in the game. So they were saying that the field lacked that at the moment, and that was one of the biggest ones. I unfortunately didn't get time to listen to all of it because we had to come on here. But it was really interesting from a miniatures point of view, because as I remember Chris saying, your husband saying, to get involved, you need to, in miniatures, you have to be painting.
Yes, you
have to
do.
learn
It's
the roles.
big investment.
Yeah, it
There's
is.
also... Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Gwen.
There's also stuff like Magic where you don't see a lot of women in the competitive Magic scene, and what it really comes down to is if you want to play the Magic, it's too expensive to play the competitive scene. And I know tons of women that play Magic. I played with them in college. Almost everyone that played Magic at my college was a woman. I'm just saying, we outnumbered the males like 3-1 playing Magic. But we would never, we just built whatever silly decks we could out of cards we owned or cards we could get cheap. And Magic only really promotes, like, it has a type of tournament where you use only commons, so it's cheap and easy to get into, but they don't promote it much. And I just, like, whenever people say that Magic's misogynist because there's no girls playing in competitive and it's sexist, I'm like, it has nothing to do with being sexist. It has everything to do with women being smart enough not to waste money just to go to fucking fights, because I'd rather just sit around playing the game. And what it really comes down to is trying to use, like, the tournament scene for most things. You're going to get a different crowd, especially if it's expensive to get in the tournament scene. Because if a tournament scene costs too much money, you're just going to see probably the same faces over and over. The people that can either afford to or have been playing it the whole time, so they don't need the extra money. And most players for things like Magic are casual because they don't want to go through an effort. And, like, I know people who play miniatures, but they don't bother painting their figures and they don't do tournaments.
They have what blasphemy?
Can I put a counter example?
Okay.
I used to be heavily involved in the Camarilla, the live-action role-playing society that White Wolf used to have until they basically gutted it. And we had loads of women doing that. It's not physical boffer LARP. It's the combat and stuff is abstracted if any occurs. And we were all getting together once a month, all dressed up in costumes and acting out our characters and stuff. And it was getting close to 50-50 men, women occasionally, and it was usually at least a third and a quarter women, which compared to Magic or tabletop stuff is pretty good going most of the time. So I don't know that it's right to blame dedication, because costuming takes dedication and turning up every month, and there was stuff going on email and IRC chats and stuff in between the monthly games and so on, and people were involved up to the eyeballs. I mean, commitment-wise, if you look at cosplayers as well, how much time, effort, and money do they put in? So I don't know that that's it, but
was it competitive?
Definitely seems to appeal to women.
That was the real sort of crux of this woman's argument.
But also cooperative.
All right. Okay.
Building alliances, politics, backstabbing. That sort of thing. So it was both. But maybe there's gender stereotypes that play into all this. I hesitate to bring them up because I'll be misquoted or something. But stereotypically, women are supposedly more into dressing up, and they're more into social side of games, and they're more into role playing than they are necessarily into moving figures about on a board. These are gender stereotypes, and whether or not they're true, they probably have some kind of pressure or steering effect on what people get into. Perhaps I don't know.
Well, when you put about these stereotypes and you culturally repeat them over and over and over, people are going to believe them whether they're true or not. And then if you go around saying gaming is male dominated and it's bad for women, women are just going to avoid it because that's what they're going to think it is. When
Actually,
all they hear are these stereotypes of gamers or whatever, that's what people are going to believe.
Well, I have a good example of that from the atheism scene. The Amazing Meeting was getting up to nearly 50-50 gender parity a while ago, and then Elevator Gate and all these spurious accusations and talk about sexism in the skeptic and atheist community and stuff blew up, and that parity just dropped away. So if you tell women that these places are sexist and horrible, unsurprisingly they stay away, even though they were on the rise before. So I don't know that anything is necessarily being helped by these kind of accusations and
Yeah.
and all this negative talk. I don't know that it's doing any good. I think it might be doing the very opposite of what people say they want to see.
I still think the
It's
biggest
untrue.
barrier. I still think the biggest barrier is BO. Because I'm not going to lie. I mean, sod it, right? How many times have I woken up about 5 or 6 in the morning? And usually hygiene's fantastic, but when you've got to go like across fucking the country to go to a tournament and you've got to get your list ready, you've got to do all that, the last thing on your mind is deodorant. And I think that's everybody in the room is exactly the same. And by 12 o'clock, you all stink. That is literally what happens in tabletop. You all end up stinking. So there was because Sour was telling me a story about a guy that complained about like the smell in a board game shop, and she was like,
Yeah.
"You didn't do anything about it." Well, I remembered actually, and I forgot this at the time. There was a story of a guy that when he was playing tournaments and the guy behind him smelled, he turned around and just sprayed deodorant on them.
Okay.
Even if they didn't notice or anything like that, he'd just like go and do it. So. Maybe that is the overall factor. I don't know if the podcast delved into that because I was half dead. Yeah, smell. There we go. There's a stereotype. Maybe it is true. We all stink.
Yep.
Yeah. What it sounds like to me is this is an issue of not of gender, but of different types of people with different personality types. You can have competitive women. You can have women who are more social. The same thing can apply to guys. So why do you think that they focus on the gender when they should just refer to, well, there's different types of people who like different types of games for different reasons? Wouldn't that be a better approach to these controversies as they were?
It would be a more sane and rational approach, but that's probably why it's not used.
Gwen's replicating, by the way.
No, that's all right.
I am Legion!
If necessary, we will cull the Gwen population down to a more manageable size.
Female gamers divide!
Wow.
But
Okay.
while trying to get things back on topic, while personality type is where it comes down to, they aren't necessarily evenly distributed by gender. He said, taking a big risk. I mean, if you look at the extremes by looking at mental problems that people have or issues, I'm trying to find the politically correct word, Ascrit, but like men are more likely to be on the autism spectrum. Women
Yes.
are more likely to have borderline personality disorder. You know, there's differences, I think, that seem to be pretty hard coded into us, but they're not. It's not like it's not necessarily determined, but there are tendencies that I think do lie in gender differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think
I
that.
hope that was well explained.
I think you did explain it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can't really be denied, really, because I do believe that your claims are backed up by evidence. I'd have to do research myself on that, but there is evidence to suggest that there are inherent differences between men and women, but that doesn't mean that all men conform to one way or all women conform to one way. And I think that's I think that's the crux of the problem, that instead of just getting rid of removing the identity politics from the situation, unless you're actually doing something that actually studies scientific differences between the sexes or whatever, where this is just tabletop games. It's not like an intrinsic laboratory where you're taking nerds and putting them in group samples. You're just reporting on you're just making social commentary. it's not like I think they put too much like in the tabletop scene and in other scenes they put too much emphasis on gender when there's no need to. Like there's different approaches to these different types of issues, and it's also seems to be people are really concern trolling. Like when Sour brought up the issues with when Sour and Gwen were discussing the issues of gender in 5th edition, there's nobody complaining from the alleged groups that they were saying that there was no real outcry from the people who would be offended by it, and it sounds like that it's just they're trying to draw controversy where there's none. So it's really a case where it's concern trolling because basically they want to they're concerned, overly concerned, and they want to pester people about it, and they just keep on belittling others for the sake of it.
Part of the problem we've got, I think, is that nerds have a kind of race memory of being attacked.
Yeah.
If you look back in comics, you've got Frederick Wortham. If you look back in D&D, you've got Pat Pulling and bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. Elvis's hips were censored and rock and roll was considered, terrible. Metal has come under attack in the past. Gamers have been called Satanists, or when you go to video games, you've got Jack Thompson to worry about. So, to a lot of nerds, me included, this whole social justice warrior thing just feels like another iteration of the exact same battle that we've been in all our lives. It's just a different tack. And the other big difference this time is that so much of the attack comes from within. Other fellow designers, our fellow nerds. So that's the big difference this time. It's not outsiders attacking; it's people who are, or at least claim to be, insiders.
Well, I think the other thing as well on top of that is we are introverts by nature, and so it's that could be the reason that we end up turtling basically in any sort of criticism that is leveled at us. It's like, oh, here we go again. This kind of validates my existence, and then we become even more entrenched in that, and it makes it even harder for sort of dialogue to maybe happen. And I think these people as well don't know how to socially interact there and put their ideas across, even when you say it's internally. And I think that's where half of the problem stems from, is that they become. I mean, how many times have you had an argument with a nerd about just what color somebody's robe was in X movie or something, or who shot first, Han or Greedo.
Yeah.
And we get to a point where we can't actually have proper dialogue because we are that retarded socially. The only way to the only way is trial by combat or roll dice. Or not speak to these people ever again and avoid them and not go to the same tournaments.
Well,
we'll go to very drastic steps to burn bridges, and that sometimes makes it quite difficult as well.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, part of the problem is just how inclusive the communities are, and they want to be seen to be inclusive. We'll welcome anybody, whether they're the size of a house and can't move without a forklift and 3 Alpers, or whether they've got BO that melts paint at 50 paces, or whether they're some kind of social justice twonk. We'll welcome them in because we're evangelical and we enjoy our hobbies and we want everybody to play them.
Exactly.
We think they're great, so we welcome these people in with open arms, and they cause problems.
I mean, that's another thing that really bothers me about this. It's basically these are issues of tabletop are nothing new. Like people getting along on the around the table and discussing things. Like I've been to a variety of forums and places. I've watched YouTube videos on the subject, and I've read a lot into the subject. And people having disagreements with each other about how the game should be played is often a problem. Like you may have, for instance, a character role-playing a paladin who has a strict moral code of conduct, and he's palling around with rogues and thieves, and then the controversy comes up where they want to resolve a moral conflict one way, but the paladin's code is so strident that it causes a problem in the group, and the DM has to kind of sort it out. Given that these problems already exist, why do they make such a big deal with a new coat of paint and make this a big social issue that has multiple? They try to put a social pressure on the whole personally, I've lost my train of thought. I apologize.
Spaghetti.
Is it because they're trying to? Is it because we're trying to build better worlds in our heads?
That's what I got from it, actually, Cerberus. It's just like, from my research of what they want, they actually, in tabletop, the people that are criticizing tabletop, they have solutions. It's not like in video games. I have no idea what Anita Sarkeesian wants, and I don't really care. But there are some people in tabletop. I believe his name was Stravoropoulos, and I did a video about him, and he had a solution to certain things that might come up in a role-playing game that could harm other people emotionally, or if you don't like a certain topic within the game, you can just socially get it away without having any sort of awkward moments. It's called X-Card.
Oh, fucking
This
God.
X card.
Yes,
X card's
it's
triggered
called
me. I'm
X-Card.
playing my X card.
Okay, go. It's okay, John. It's okay.
But
Go on.
But to quote unquote, like, I would never. I know nobody in my when we do get together for board games or RPG nights, there is nobody that will pull that bullshit because we're all comfortable with each other. I know that the mechanic was originally designed for people who were new people at like conventions. Was that correct?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you're with your group of mates, you kind of know where each other's boundaries are because you've played together for a while and you figured all that out. But at conventions, you don't. But to suddenly whip out a card and demand that the games master tosses scenario out the window and accommodate your gentle little fifis seems to me to be disruptive to the other 5-6 other people around the table. That's,
not only that, though. Sorry to interrupt. Not only that, I agree with that 100%. But it ruins the context of the game. Certain things might need to be included in a game in order for the environment to flow. And you're literally telling someone, no, you're going to have to stop that because I want you to stop that. Why? Because I'm triggered by it. I don't know what that even implies, and you don't even know X cards. If anybody knows, it's just an index card with an X on it. You toss it down when you hear something. It could be anything that could trigger you in a sense.
But there's no discussion.
No.
That's the other thing as well. It's like, here's the card, and moving along, and now for something entirely different.
But
yeah, I mean,
like,
if I'm running a horror game, I want to creep you out. I want you
Yes.
to be uncomfortable. I want you to feel horror or disgust or whatever. And if you slap one of those cards down, it's, if I've put up an advert for a game at a con and it says adult game may contain disturbing themes, and you whip one of those cards out, I should just fucking slap you.
Well, when I've run for lots of different groups of people. I've also played in. And what it really comes down to is when you're trying to assemble a group, you talk to each other. You can do it over the internet, play over the internet. You can just have a discussion. You say, this is, like, I like the same page tool, especially if you say, this is the kind of game I'm running. And when I go for a game, like, I have personal issues, I say, well, I have these personal issues, and if that's okay, I'd like to join your game. If it's not, I perfectly understand. And I try to discuss, if you have a phobia or whatever, you try to sort it. You don't have to necessarily go into the background, but before you join the game, like, be an adult and say, I have this thing, and is it okay that if I have this thing, I'm here? Can we be reasonable human beings having a conversation? But if you look at what these people do, they don't like discussion. If you look at one of the rules in RPGNet, you're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to question anything, and you're not allowed to offer up solutions to problems. These are actual rules in RPGNet. I even have the link saved. You cannot offer solutions to problems. You cannot ask questions. You can be banned for either.
What happened with RPGNet?
It used to be a really good kind of rough and tumble discussion place. I don't really know what happened.
The mods became SJW, I guess.
Well, they're a combination of SJWs and trolls from Something Awful these days. I got banned originally for not liking the New World of Darkness and saying so. That was why I got banned.
You want to know what's funny? New World of Darkness was going to do an MMO, but it tanked in sales. And you want to know who the number one people that used to buy supposedly statistically bought World of Darkness, was supposedly bought more by women than anything else. So if it's tanking, guess who's not buying it?
Yeah.
So much for, and now they're blaming misogyny. It's like, no, it's not misogyny. Women aren't buying it, not because males are scaring them. They love the old World of Darkness. Why the fuck did you fuck it up?
Yeah.
How did they mess up World of Darkness?
Let me count the ways. It's just not as interesting, as engaging. It's really hard to put a particular finger on, but the original World of Darkness was kind of wild and crazy, and everything was in it, and just enthusiasm dripped off every page, and it was sexy, which never hurts either. The new one's just kind of dull, lifeless, soulless.
Yeah, and they've been not doing well with the systems, so it's not because of misogyny, it's because, well, not even women gamers want to play the damn thing. Like, the only thing they got halfway right was Changeling, from what I've heard, but everything else is meh. That's just what I've heard. I haven't played Changeling.
So
It's hard
basically,
not to feel sorry for them, though, lately.
so essentially, it has nothing to do with any kind of people being offended. It just has to do with the game just being bad and terrible.
It's not terrible. It's just after Old World of Darkness, nothing could really stand up to it. Some of it, I think, is down to the politicization and the being careful. I mean, the new Dark Ages, don't they have David Hill working on that? And God, he is awful. He is like king of the SJWs. And he is just awful. Now, his own company, Machine Age Productions, I used to big them up because I always say, put your money where your mouth is. If you don't like the games that are out there, go and make your own, rather than fucking with everybody else. And they did. They went off and they made their own games, and cool. But, bringing him and these others in to do Dark Ages, just particularly if you're even pretending to be remotely historical, some of their ideas just seem a little odd to me. Actually, that's a problem I have with a lot of games. They whitewash the past, like Spirit of the Century, which is a pulp game by the Fate guys, Evil Hat. If you're looking back to the 20s and 30s, then you're going to have problems with sexism and racism, but they just kind of wash all over that. And I think a lot of the story engagement in playing in the past, like the past is a different country, it has different culture, it has different problems. If you're going to play in that period, how can you ignore that stuff? You should play against it, or to it, or up to it. Just ignoring it seems to be disingenuous and to be forgetting the struggles that people had in the past.
I completely agree. I mean, it's an element that was of the time period, and to ignore that, it is disingenuous, like you said. And I don't really understand why so many works of fiction whitewash the past of when it comes to issues like that. Sometimes it's a case where it's not relevant. Other times they are clearly trying to be politically correct. It depends on the context of the story, really. But ultimately, if you're gonna make an entire game which involves an entire world, I would argue you would need to include that element, because when that context comes up, when those issues come up, you would have to address that in a way that makes sense. So you can't just have black people, by and large, being a rich majority, for instance. That really wouldn't make sense in the 1920s in America, for instance.
No. Yeah, I mean, utopias are boring. I mean, from a storytelling point of view, from a game point of view, utopias are boring unless they're under threat. So, murder makes for good stories. Genocide makes for good stories, appalling as it is.
Utopia is great if something's threatening it.
Yeah.
Because then it's let's save Utopia. But
I mean, it's just the fact that in my mind they don't care about context. There could be a context of a situation, something happening. I know for me personally, I defend things like murder being in an RPG, rape being in an RPG, if it's conducive to the narrative. If it works, it works. Who am I to say that you cannot do that, or that it's not going to? Because then you're halting the creator's creative process. That sort of negates the purpose entirely.
Talking about rape, can I mention something that happened in a game I ran?
Oh, sure.
So I run D&D primarily, and I was running game. My games, spoiler, my games that I run are majority female. Oh noes. But I do have male players, and I was run. It's just my group of friends. But I had a one-off villain, and because I like to use I like to use random monster charts to come up with stuff to do, and then I like to take whatever comes up and then come up with a story based around the monster. So it was like a demon. And I said, oh, well, this fits in with something else that was going on, because the party decided to wander off in a complete random direction that I hadn't even planned for. So, ignoring all the plot hooks elsewhere. So, they come to this camp, and one of them sneaks his way into camp, and they find out because he was monster race, but not evil. He was neutral and preferred goodness. It was sort of a story where the monster races were being unduly persecuted, and so he sneaks into the camp of this demon and followers that are similar to his race, and the demons got eating people, has a woman in a cage. And they find out, like, the woman's been... Because it's supposed to be a one-off villain, so I want them to be as evil as I possibly can make.
Yeah.
It's a demon. And I want the party to kill him. So I said, yeah, you watch his tent, because he was basically infiltrating for information. And at night, he, with a big spiked demon member, rapes the woman that he has in the cage. And my players were like, we have to kill this guy. Because that's what I wanted. I wanted them to feel like this is a demon doing a demon thing, and they want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Their argument would be that that's a cheap and easy way of establishing someone's evil credentials, in the same way that, putting babies on a spike and roasting them over a pit would be. Which is fair enough from one perspective, but I mean, if it worked in your game, it's not. No one was that upset by it. No one was hurt by it.
Exactly.
Why should that be a problem for anyone else? And determining quality is such a subjective way to look at things.
Right.
It's no basis for censorship. I mean, they would accept Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which is about genuinely institutionalized rape in a science fictional society. They would accept that because, I don't know, maybe they feel it has the right message, or it's done in a tasteful and effective and proper fashion, but they would condemn something else that uses exactly the same plot elements. But like I said, it's so subjective that is not any kind of basis upon which you can decide whether to censor or not. People have to have room to fuck up, to do things badly. Just if you don't like it, don't read it. Don't.
And even if it's a cheap way to just make a villain, and I was trying to build something off a random encounter table, I made something quick, easy, and creepy so that they could feel like they were the just good people doing the good thing. And it may be a bit cheap, but it was a good way to get the message that this is a demon. They do horrible things. We already know that. And if you're going to be spying on them doing horrible things, it has to do something. It may be cheap, but it fits the simple heroic narrative where you don't necessarily want things to be too complicated.
Yeah, and they got the emotional payoff of defeating and killing him, right?
Yeah, well, almost. One of the other players did something that everyone stopped talking to him for. Basically, if you don't mind my just going into their amazing plan they came up with.
Go for it.
One of the players was a druid, and he turned to a giant badger, so they made a pit. They made a pit under his tent, and they were just they had a way to make a signal. So they got the infiltrator character to get him to come there, and at the bottom of the pit, they covered the ground in, like, 10 flasks of holy water, so it would, more than that, and it would fall into a bunch of holy water, and it would take 10d6 falling damage, because this was a high-level critter. And they had a person with feather fall, so that the woman, when she fell out with the demon, wouldn't get injured. So they feather fall her and the person that was there so their friend didn't get hurt, and they featherfall them. And they, after making a signal, thumping on the ground, and the badger caves in the hole, they cast Featherfall on the infiltrator character and the woman, and they do as much damage as they can, but it has damage reduction. And one character has a silver sword. Not silver sword, but it has the one that overcame his damage reduction. And all he needed to do was hit the monster. Everyone knew that. I let them know because I'm like, all you have to do is hit it. And they knew that this creature can teleport at will any distance. They had to kill it within 1 round. They had 1 round to kill it. And they did a lot of amazing stuff with their plan, and with like the holy water and the pit and their resources and the featherfall. The player decided he was going to catch the woman who was falling to the ground safe instead of attacking the monster to finish it off, knowing that on the monster's next turn, like, I sat there. I said, do you really want to do that? He's like, yeah. So it's like, she's under featherfall. Do you really want to be doing that? Or just hit it. He's like, no, I want to be dashing. And I'm like, and then it's the monster's turn, and I'm sitting there for like 10 minutes going, I don't want to make this thing teleport away. I made this thing so vile, I wanted you guys to use the intelligence that my group had, and I like them capitalizing on their ability to make good plans. And I was like, but the creature has an intelligence like far beyond a human's, and it would teleport away. It wouldn't sit there and fight them. It was at 1 hit point. It could have been knocked over by the person that wanted to be the dashing swordsman. And everyone's like, I'm like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure. And like, the session basically stopped after he teleported away because there was nothing keeping him. Because that would have been dumb. And all the other players are, why did you do that? We kept telling you not to. And it ended up like because this isn't the first time he did something really dumb, not just dumb, but horribly dumb in the game that ended up with bad consequences. And it's like, but I wanted her to fall in love with me. And I'm like, wouldn't it have, we're all afterwards, wouldn't it have been better to just kill the thing that had been hurting her? There was going to be this massive, heroic plan. And like, I was so happy with my players that they came up with this plan. And then that happened. And the game ended up ending 2 sessions after because we just couldn't cope with the fact that happened. And then someone said, before this game ends, I'm killing his character. I'm like, all right, the whole party came up with a plan to kill his character. And
Did they go through with it?
Yep, they did, and the game ended. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done, and I didn't run for like 4 months.
Nice. But see, those kind of tensions are typically what more happens. It has to do with the game mechanics about the competitive nature in the game, even if it is PvE, rather than what social issues are going to trigger someone or not, like who's going to get offended by what. Most stories in which there's fallout is due to the mechanics. Even the Paladin example I referenced earlier, common example, is due to the mechanics at the end of the day, because under the rules, Paladins act and behave a certain way, living up to a moral code. So I don't. Maybe I haven't heard enough from other. Maybe I haven't listened or heard enough from other people's experiences. But the idea of people being like offended being the main cause of tensions, I don't really see that. Am I accurate in saying that?
It doesn't seem to happen as much in the play space. I mean, I only know UK conventions really, but everyone's fairly laid back and chilled out over here. And I don't think I've ever seen a problem rise up around that. Yeah, rules, certainly, arguments over rules, characters dying, when someone thinks they shouldn't have, that sort of thing. But I've never seen that at the table. I have seen people complaining about products that are on sale. I've seen people complaining about posters and art. I've seen people complaining about content of books on forums and at discussions at conventions and things, talking about these subjects. But at the actual table, no, not so much.
I've nearly wanted to punch someone in the face while playing Eldritch Horror. Does that count? That guy was an idiot.
Were they complaining that that Cthulhu's tentacles were phallic, or were they just
No. This guy was like spending his entire turn counting all the loot he'd got, basically,
Oh
instead of actually doing it. And I was just like, you need to do. And he was like, I know. And I've got this, and I can do it with this. And I was just like, fucking, just hurry up, because my character had pretty much died the entire time trying to do all the stuff, and he just kind of came along and like picked up all the shit after I died, and yeah.
Okay, that's just being a dick, though. That's
Yeah.
not being a moralizing dick.
No. But I did want to punch him in the face. So they do cause violence, these games. They should come with warning.
If my game had been in person, not over the internet, I'm sure there would have been a lot of punching.
Yeah, try playing Pandemic with a drunk person, and you'll want to really punch someone. It's just what I don't understand out of all of this. Do they really not want to play with me? Like honestly, I was looking at X Card stuff again, and he said a lot of people are a little apprehensive about playing with him once he busts out the cards and he's like, here, we're going to do this. And they don't want to play, and he's not upset about that. He actually goes, well, if you don't want to play, well, then that's good for me, because now I can find a group of people who he'd actually want to play with. And that's sort of, in my mind, that's counterintuitive to the tabletop community as a whole. I don't know if I'm wrong with that, but I thought we were all about getting new people to play and playing with different kinds of people and having fun. And it wasn't about, vetting people in order for you to get it. It was completely out of the blue for me.
Well,
seeing that kind of mindset.
That's supposedly part of their motivation for what they do, though, in attacking.
Yeah.
The art and the content of these games. They want more diverse representations in the art. They want more diverse representations in the text, and so on. I think there's issues with that, but won't go into that just yet. So supposedly their motivation is to bring more people in, but then they set up all these barriers at the same time. It just seems a little confused.
Counterintuitive is what it sounds like.
But it just sounds exclusively inclusive. I'm just sitting there going, yeah, that'll work.
We want more people, but we want the right kind of people.
Not the right people. You're not the right kind of people for this game. I'm sorry. You have to fill out this form before you play this game. Oh, man. It's weird.
You must lack this amount of privilege to play this game.
Oh my god. That's what it comes down to is to play a game, you can just be anyone, just find some people that play with, and if you don't like those people, find different people.
Yeah. So
that's why I love tabletop RPGs, because I could just play over the internet with just about anyone. And it's just so much fun that my gaming group has expanded beyond whoever's at my local game store to whoever's on the internet.
The other thing is archetypes, I think. I mean, you think of heroic archetypes going right the way back into ancient myth and so on. And, these are strong, these are powerful. If they're crippled in some way, they compensate for it in another, like Hephaestus, or looking at ancient gods and legends. It's all something to aspire to, something to escape to. So when your diversity starts including things that are depressing enough in reality, why would we want to bring them into our fantasy world when we're trying to escape?
The only reason
Go ahead.
The only reason to bring something depressing into a fantasy world is because the players in the fantasy world have the ability to fight against it, which they might not have in real life, so it's a really good outlet.
Yeah, or to overcome it, or...
Yeah,
something.
But otherwise, there's really no point. And one of the big complaints is, why aren't there more Eastern figures in D&D? It's Western-based fantasy. If you want, there's Oriental Adventures over there, or Legend of the Five Rings. If you want your Oriental fantasy.
That's cultural imperialism and.
Oh, come on.
And appropriation. So,
it's just based on a specific era inspired.
I've seen it exactly said that way. No, that's
Me
cultural
too.
appropriation. It's cartoonish representations of these cultures, and it's offensive.
Yet they think you can be transracial and that's okay. Being
Do they?
transracial is okay and not a cultural appropriation, whatever that means.
You've been spending way too much time on Tumblr.
Oh no, my friends have been spending way too much time telling me about the horrors of Tumblr.
Wow.
The people think you can be racist to orcs, which don't even exist. So
My elf is racist to orcs.
Cerberus has some interesting opinions on that topic.
No, we're not going there.
All right.
That conversation was hilarious, and it was private. And it was a total troll. I just have to put that out there.
The orc put the lotion on its skin.
It's not just orcs though. Elves are apparently representations of Aryan supremacy. I've seen that said as well.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
Most people don't like pointy ears.
Tolkien-style elves are apparently racial supremacism. Why do I stay?
No, orcs are the real racial supremacists because they just want to blow everyone else up for not being orcs. At least
No, Tyranids are. They just want to eat everything.
Yeah, see,
Not
Tyranids.
them,
There you go.
them.
They're the racial supremacists, the Tyranids. Aren't they complaining
Yeah.
about Tyranid privilege?
They just want to absorb your biomass and make you like them. And...
But why aren't there female space marines? This is
right, okay, now I knew this was going to happen. There used to be female space marines, okay? And I'm not talking about Sisters of Battle. There used to be female space marines. So,
in the model,
In all
in the models
honesty,
or the
how
lore?
can you tell
No.
under all that armor?
in both, they used to be basically back in the day when Rogue Trader happened. Space Marines weren't pious monks. That's why they're all men now, basically. They were basically convicts, criminals. They were like StarCraft Space Marines, basically. That's how they originally were. So they were like gangers. They were what basically Necromunda became, and they had access to power armor. None of the lore had been properly fleshed out back then, or it was just completely different. By the time Second Edition came out, that you had the whole Emperor myth, you had the whole Horus Heresy properly fleshed out, and they started becoming, more monk-like, basically, and defenders of the Imperial realm, basically, rather than just convicts, criminals. I mean, they used to have graffiti on their armor. They used to have swear words on their armor, basically, and they used to have females, yeah. And there was one or two female led figures at the time. Obviously, the other side of the coin is now that you do have female representation in the Imperium. You have the Sisters of Battle, which have just gone through basically a generation of Matt Ward trying to wipe them off the face of the earth because he hates them, essentially. I don't know why, whether he's a massive misogynist or not.
So basically, the reason there are no female space marines is for thematically appropriate reasons to evoke monks and Templars and things like that from
Sisters
real
of
history.
are basically nuns.
They are essentially nuns, and most of the orders are actually hospital orders. Basically, so there are militaristic orders, but they are mad. They are even more pious than the Space Marines, basically, which is quite funny because they're also in the stories most corruptible as well because their psycho-indoctrination isn't the same as the monks. So it's they are kind of I don't know why they're kind of, because the images that came out at the time when they first got their own codex were very strong. They were very, and you do have, Sisters Repenter, you have all various different, you have the ones that basically flagellate themselves. They are quite strong. I guess it was the boob armor and the combat heals that pissed off lots of people, basically. But that's the only thing that really. Oh, and that and demonettes. Demonettes have been dramatically changed over the years.
I've heard some scuttlebutt about people complaining about the new Dark Eldar witches as well.
Oh, I can assume that is probably the case. I mean, they I guess because their core audience has shifted away from sort of 16 to 18 to younger, they're trying to, and parents, are obviously going to question, why am I buying a box full of semi-naked women with giant crab claws, or these sadomasochist-looking witches. They're going to tone down some of that. I mean, even the literature in some areas has been toned down dramatically.
That's on that note, it really surprises me that anyone would attack Warhammer 40K for being having bad elements in it, because this is a dystopian future. The humanity has become the bad guys because they essentially worship a theocracy, and and it's not because the opposition's anyway good. They're all evil, and they're essentially evil people versus evil people fighting and killing each other in these authoritarian regimes at total constant war. So you think that people with that kind of mindset might be sexist, might be racist, and when I say might be, in the Warhammer's case, yeah, definitely are those two things. So the fact that there are no female Space Marines is actually par for the course of a totalitarian regime.
Yeah, the only place where there is actually equality, and this is where it is in basically the meat grinders of the Imperial Guard or the Imperial Navy, where women and men are all treated equally. Actually, but that's due to sort of conscription, and just basically it is a meat grinder. Your lives are nothing in comparison, basically, to a Space Marine.
They don't seem to think that you can portray a dark or evil or nasty society without meaning you support it somehow.
Yeah.
Unless you're condemning it every other sentence in the text.
Well, the thing is, I guess people identify with their armies. I mean, so that's why they start condemning it, basically. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, some of the various different chapters are more religious than others. And the whole concept of the religious Space Marines is bloody hilarious, because as the Emperor tried to basically decree that there were no gods but men, basically, and which was a complete lie as well. But it was mankind achieved more when it was unified. He ended the basically decades of centuries of warfare on Earth, uniting the whole of Earth, telling them that the basically there are no gods. It's a secular Earth. Only then to turn around and say otherwise. But if you actually go back and read the Horus Heresy, that is like mankind at its height, without religion, all working towards a common goal. And it only goes dystopian when it goes Catholic space Nazis. When and it's kind of like the only way to then address it was to basically go back. So it's a wonderful story, basically, of just like how yes, these miraculous miracles happen, but you have to pay the consequences, and they're very rare, basically, and you're gonna have to live in a dystopian nightmare, basically, that just exists to keep humanity ticking over. Eventually, it is literally just a crumbling edifice of mankind. It's a beautiful story if you look deeper than the actual just the miniatures that they're trying to hock out, about 50 quid for 3 of them at a time.
To be honest, the main barrier for entry for myself, and I imagine a lot of other people, is the cost for these games.
Yeah, which is ironic because they discontinued all their metal. They now churn out like super heavy tanks that probably cost like a couple of pence to make in China and sell them at retail for 50 quid at a time. It's closer to 100 in some cases. The real problems in tabletop are not these SJW things. They're the Kickstarter, which is a massive fucker for board games as well. And it's the cost. It is the barrier cost of entry that, as we've discussed before, stops a lot of people from getting involved. And relatively, Games Workshop is continuously having to push up these. They're alienating their older, more loyal fan base by not only cost but making the game pretty crap as well to entice just kids rolling as many dice as possible to affect change.
But in tabletop gaming, there's shit like Settlers of Catan. You buy the game once you're set, or like D&D, you only need to buy the core rulebook or use like D20 SRD.
Yeah, it's what, about 60 quid for the core set of D&D, which, is the price of a new PS4 game or a X-Bone game. People drop that all the time, but they seem more reluctant to buy things that you can get a lifetime of joy out of. It's weird. It's something we've been trying to deal with for ages.
So essentially, they sell a whole bunch of accessories. With a lot of these games, they sell a bunch of accessories that are optional, not necessarily required.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I play a lot of deck building.
Except for competitive ones, like super competitive games like Magic.
I wouldn't say...
I've never heard of Settlers of Catan competitive tournaments.
There is ranking. I think there are rankings. National. I'm not sure, though. But the deck building games are interesting because, yes, there is... You can technically play, like Netrunner, for instance, with just the core deck. But you really do need, obviously, the boosters to add to that as well.
I mean, if you want to play casual, you only need a few things. But if you want to be in the tournament scene, which is all the social authoritarians seem to care about, is the tournament scene. Well, who cares?
Yeah,
Not too much.
I mean, when you go to a tournament, you end up... It's not just even the models. You need your lucky dice bag, your lucky dice, your golden plated tape measure, your... your energy drinks in a crate. You've got to look like you're professional. And you've got to smell bad as well. You've got to really put your opponent off. It's like, you just got to lean back, put your arms over your head and go, smell this bitch. And that's how you play competitive tabletop. Sorry.
For a slight change of topic, James, you are a tabletop game dev yourself, correct?
That's right, yeah.
How did you first start working in the industry, and what projects have you been working on? Can you just basically relate your experiences?
Okay. Always wanted to design games, and I was always noodling about with my own stuff for ages. For a while, I was putting out photocopied fanzines and things at conventions in ye days before ye internet, and then I got together with a couple of friends and bashed out some ideas for books, and we basically hammered every single games company we could think of with our propositions for books. And Steve Jackson Games took the bait on one of them, and that became the Munchkin's Guide to Power Gaming, which then led into the whole Munchkin card game, board game, hat, shot glasses. There's probably umbrellas with Munchkin on it now. So yeah, that was kind of my start, and that book did really well and won an Origins award. And off the back of that, I got work for Mongoose Publishing. And off the back of that, I got some work for Wizards, Wizards of the Coast, and some other companies. And then during the sort of .com, when the .com bubble burst, I was left without a job for 18 months, and I thought, now, what the hell, I'll just go for it, and started my own company. So, stuff I've worked on, lots. For Wizards, I worked on City of Stormreach, Monster Manual 3 or 4 for the previous edition, 3.5. Some stuff for their magazine, which then became their sort of blog thing that they were doing. I've done stuff for Call of Cthulhu, for Cubicle 7, and a lot of stuff. It's hard to remember all of it sometimes.
Senpai! Thanks for talking to me, Senpai. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Experiences-wise, I mean, was there anything specific you wanted me to talk about?
Well, I did see one of your latest projects actually is a Gamergate card game. Can you tell us more about that?
I like to make games about things that interest me, if at all possible. I think that's probably true of any creative person. You like to work on stuff that interests you. And I was into Gamergate from the start, from before it was Gamergate. I was keeping an eye on things. I've had my own negative experiences in the tabletop scene and in the fiction scene, and places with similar problems, or problems that were attendant to Gamergate. And I've been involved for 3 months plus, and I just kind of needed a break. Really, I wanted to do something cathartic and make fun of the whole thing, and just have a bit of fun and maybe diffuse the situation. That's not what happened, but that's what I was trying to do, to make something fun and just take the piss out of the whole stupid argument. But no, that's not what happened.
Yeah, I heard you were having trouble getting the game published.
Okay, well, as an independent publisher, when I'm doing stuff for myself, I mostly electronically publish. So the big site for doing that is drivethrurpg/rpgnow.com. So most of my stuff, my personal stuff, has been published through there. It's kind of the Steam of ebook RPGs, yeah? To give you some idea of how important it is and what it does. So I uploaded the game to there and went on about my day without thinking too much about it while I was waiting for the print-on-demand site to set up. And then I get a message on Twitter saying, "Oh, it's been pulled." So first I'd heard about it, so I go back and check. I'd sold about 5 or 6 copies, so it can't have been up for that long. I mean, you get a rush of sales when you put something out, and then things slow down. So yeah, I still had no idea of what had happened. I went nosing around, sent some emails off to DriveThru to try and work out what was going on, and apparently they'd had complaints, but we've had complaints about projects before. It's not even the most controversial thing I've ever done, let alone other people. I mean, there's been games on torture, crack whores, prison rape, you name it.
Yeah.
There's been all sorts uploaded there. So there was a long, convoluted series of arguments and discussions and trying to work out what exactly the problem was. And I'm still not really much the wiser, but part of the reason it seems to have been pulled, despite what people are saying, seems to be because another company put pressure on DriveThru, basically alluding to the fact that they might withdraw their products and thus the earnings from them if the Gamergate card game wasn't pulled. That is the only thing that's different about this situation than previous times I've had work complained about, or other people have had work complained about. The only difference that I can see that would mean that this actually happened was that, well, it's more than one company, but yeah, a company or two, one fairly big, putting pressure on the electronic distributor. So it got pulled. It's probably not coming back. They said they might look at it again in a year or so. I don't know whether I'll bother holding them to that, because it's a very topical, satirical game and it will lack the same impact at that time.
That's
So-
troubling, because that's essentially someone in the industry pressuring other powers in the industry to pull a game because of the politics involved. I can only speculate as to why that would be, but still, that seems to be a large issue of impropriety on the part of that website. Could you just mention it again?
DriveThruRPG/RPG Now, they're both owned by a parent company called One Bookshelf. They also do comics and fiction and stuff downloads on their sites. Yes, but it's not a nice position for them to be in, so I sympathise to an extent, though I'm still mad at them.
Yeah.
Especially after seeing how Gabe Newell stepped in on Hatred and showed the way when it comes to principles. I think so. Yeah, I'm still mad at them. They've said it's a one-time thing. They're not creating a new policy, and they absolutely will not bow to pressure from companies. But I find it hard to believe, considering that's the only thing that's different this time around.
Is it possible you can tell which companies are behind it, or are you not allowed to disclose, or do you just not know?
Well, everyone knows anyway. The main company that seems to have been trying to apply pressure was Evil Hat, who make Fate and
Oh.
yeah.
Huh.
And people associated with them, freelancers and others. So, which is a shame, because while I don't like the guys that make Fate, I like their game. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to boycott it or anything in return, because it's a good game and you can get it for free anyway. But it's just disappointing, very disappointing.
Yeah, it does sound very disappointing, and it sounds very anti-consumer as a policy, as a business policy. I do not have any idea why they would, considering the other types of games you described and the content therein. I don't know why the company would basically just take this political issue. Maybe because it's such a hot button in the media right now.
Yeah.
Is there any precedent of this happening before?
The only times I've seen them pull anything before was because of IP infringement. Though it took them ages to pull a game that I'd reported for IP infringement. So this was relatively speedy. Um, I think what it comes down to is, yeah, that Gamergate is such a hot button issue, and I didn't actually believe that people believed their own press about it. You know, you see all this stuff saying, "Oh, it's a hate movement, it's a hate group," stuff like that. I wasn't taking that seriously because it isn't. And I didn't think anyone else outside of a few extremists was taking that seriously. But apparently not. So, you know, they say, oh, it deals with violence. I'm like, what? What violence? What are you talking about? It's about harassing women. No, no. Gamergate isn't about harassing women. The game certainly isn't. You know, oh, it's about this, that, and the other. No,
Yeah,
no.
you're preaching to the choir at this point. I mean, like anyone who's been paying attention to Gamergate knows it's not a hate movement. I mean, that's just
But it
media
has
spin.
this. But it has this terrible image, and a lot of people quite a lot of whom I previously used to respect, even if I didn't like them, seem to have bought into it wholesale. And then that seems to be their justification for not allowing me to sell where I normally would. Is that it's just like Gamergate is a magic word now that they can bring up and everyone will condemn it without thinking. That's a shame, but there you go.
Yeah. Can you briefly describe how the game is played?
Okay, you guys mentioned Netrunner earlier. It kind of plays a bit like that in a vague kind of way. It's two player only, unfortunately, but you play adversarially. Social Justice Warriors are one deck, and Gamergate is the other deck. So you draw cards, and the Social Justice Warriors play out ethics breaches into play. And their aim is to try and ward Gamergate off until they can get away with the ethics breach, which happens by the card rotating over the turn. And Gamergate is trying to expose the ethics breach. So each ethics breach has three values: corruption, outrage, and bullshit. And Gamergate has to beat all three values, which they do by playing attackers on it. Like Half a Chan is one of the attackers. Absolute Cookie is another attacker. Yeah.
I've had a great idea. You could add as a booster deck, the E-Celeb drama bullshit deck.
Oh yeah.
You can just throw that in, and it's either a third player or it just fucks the whole thing up for everybody. I play my King of Pole.
I play everyone's a shell.
Email cards and that sort of thing. And then on the Social Justice Warrior side, they've got defenders like White Knights, corrupt moderators, and they can do things like dox people. Well, both sides can do that, or do DDoS attacks, or you've got insults you can fling to reduce people's values and so on. So you just vie backwards and forwards, trying to win ethics breaches, and whoever gets the most ethics breaches wins.
That actually sounds like a clever and ingenious way to a game, and I would be interested in it.
I've got a video demo up on my YouTube channel, so if you want to check out, I mean, it was just an off-the-cuff demo. It wasn't very professional or anything, but you can kind of see how it plays there.
Sounds great. And moving on to moving on to another topic. What was it? Oh, I'm sorry. I've seemed to spaghetti. I really hate.
Doesn't take long, does it? So well, you're doing so well, and then bleh. Okay.
Gwen, I know that you are a games developer. Do you have any experience in designing tabletop games?
Lots, but the publisher ended up going under because he was an idiot. I could go into how crazy all of that ended up being and how my game never got published, but everyone else's game got published because I was more interested in helping other people get their games made and getting my game finished. And like and how he kept changing the person who was basically vetting the games that were coming in on me, and it's like, so who's in charge of my game now? And so I'm like, he scouted me up, thought my game would make a lot of money, and then there was mishandling, and then he's like, I want you to design me a tabletop RPG system, and I'm like, okay, and then he disappears for a year, and then he comes add like over a year, and me and my buddies that were working on it with me were like, well, what are we gonna do? We have all these games and shit, and he's gone, and people started sending me emails trying to get in touch with him because they found my email on my LinkedIn account, which I haven't been able to log back into to edit in ages, and to say that I'm no longer part of that group, and it's like, I don't know what happened to him, and unfortunately I don't really have a say over anything, despite having been the only person to be consistent and be with him and try to support his company from the beginning. He ended up basically, and like when he came back, his wife divorced him, and so he starts yelling at me that I don't
Holy
have
crap.
a game system finished to his specification. Meanwhile, people that came after me, he had published physical copies of their games. Oh, and I should tell you that he made us put, like, it's a private company and that's fine, but to say he had us assembling the product into boxes, and while that's fine, with mine, the place that we had to work in was moldy, and I got super sick every time I was there. So that was a problem. And then one time I was at a con I was supposed to help represent, I lost my voice because I'd been working in the workshop the day before. And he gets upset with me for being kind of antisocial when I can't talk. And
This sounds like a nightmare. Oh my god.
I wasted 5 years of my life on that. And then at the end
Wow.
of it, that one card game he got me in on, I'm never going to be able to publish it because according to the contract, like if I could make a computer game of it, that's fine. I only gave physical rights away. Because I was like in college when he scouted me out, and I went into like a deep depression when that happened because some other really horrible shit happened to me. So basically, indie publishing can be really hard on its own without even any of the rest of this stuff that's causing trouble for indie press. Just to let you know, there's already enough hardship to begin with to be an indie, and now we got all these people calling everyone frickin' cis white male anal tentacle rape monster.
I haven't been
Yeah,
told
but-
that yet, but okay.
And like I'm trying to design games now, and I'm designing a tabletop RPG because that's easy. I don't even need to necessarily make a book. I can just make a wiki and make it all free, which is what I'm doing. Because as a kid, all I wanted to do was make games to make people happy. I don't really care too much about the money. I'm on disability. I'm fine. I can just spend my life streaming game dev and trying to make people happy. But I'm working on a system, do most of the work live, and people are always allowed to come in my stream and comment or watch my videos, whatever. I explain every decision, and I go over repercussions of every decision to like the 9th degree, just to let people know that every decision when you're making a game has a consequence, and say, well, does this fit? And one of the people watching has sort of picked up on enough basic game design knowledge that when I mentioned a mechanic I really like, he says, yes, but isn't this counter to this aspect of the game? And I'm like, you're right, it is. I need to rethink that. And he's like, see, I've been paying attention. So,
That sounds awesome.
yeah, basically I'm doing my best to derp around. I also use my stream to just talk about game mechanics in games with anyone that wants to just come on. Instead of working on my game, we can just discuss game mechanics, because I've had people come on just to discuss, not like well-known famous people, but people that want to just discuss game mechanics about White Wolf or whatever, and compare it to like other game systems, and that's a lot of fun, just discussing game mechanics, because that's my passion. So that's my experience, and yeah, there's more than enough trouble without these people that think we're tentacle monsters.
Oh, definitely. Like, to my eyes, the social authoritarians that get involved with these issues by making up issues, essentially, they're essentially impeding actual industry discussion and actual issues that really matter. And basically, they've put a roadblock in actually resolving the other problems, which does lead me to speculate a number of scenarios as to why that is. But I don't like to get involved dabble in speculation too much. Before we
So,
wrap up, I'll go ahead.
Can I just quickly say I agree with a lot of the things that they claim to say, which is more diversity is good contextually.
Yeah.
Better representation is good contextually, and so what I don't agree with is the way they go about it, the public shaming, the bullying, the
Exactly. The
making
peer
up
pressure.
accusations, the peer pressure, the boycotts, the blacklists, all this stuff is not any way to go about it. The best solution is to make your own shit.
Well, I found out that a lot of conversation with these people, especially over here at the moment, is there is no middle ground currently. Everything's very polarized. It's either very left or very right, especially in the UK currently in the political sphere. So any moderates, well, I definitely find that the left is really needs to look at better sort of role models than people like Russell Brand and things like that currently. But that was and I had a conversation with the guy today, and he was just like, they need to get over this smug air of superiority, and I think that's why a lot of their ideas aren't really approachable because they're not approachable themselves. And it causes this kind of reaction, and it's everywhere. It's not just in these games. It is literally.
I'm far left, and I'm not on their side, so there's hope.
I know. That's it's kind of weird.
I'm pretty left myself, but
yeah.
socially at least.
Yeah. The thing is, though, that they're at the end of the day, they're hypocrites. Like, we don't have to explain why. They everything they claim that they're not, they do. We see them act, and they do what they protest against, and it's really like the public shaming and the bullying. That's something that really bugs me. And like, they have issues that are sometimes they actually do bring up actual issues, and when that happens, it's invalidated because of the hypocrisy. And you really can't. And like Cerberus said, you really can't have a conversation with them because they're too self-righteous, and I don't get it. It's like this used to be.
And that's really sad to me. I'm a political scientist. That's really sad to see that two sides can't really talk about something that, in my eyes, it shouldn't even be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was going to ask a question, like, do we see this a lot in the indie sphere? Because that's the feeling I've been getting, that there's a lot of people who are authoritarians who have made games, and they flop hard, and they go around pointing out other major titles, other major RPGs that are successful, and they don't like them for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think.
If you look at stuff, things like Depression Quest and Gone Home and shit like that, and some of the stuff that people say around them, I'm not making a judgment call on the quality of the games. I'm just saying people seem to feel that and even the Brianna Wu game, people seem to feel that the failure of their game doesn't lie within the game itself, but lies outside of the game, as sort of a complaining about the AAA industry or basically anything other than themselves. And I find that this is obviously, not true, because even tabletop, there are indie games that succeed.
Yes.
And if you look on Steam, there's shit like Shovel Knight, and that's an indie game, and that's widely popular. And Castle Crashers, and all these great little games, and it's like, no, it's not that the AAA are doing bad thing, or that games are misogynist. It's just your game sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Or it has very narrow appeal. But the problems we've got with indie computer games mirrors the same problem we've got with indie tabletop games.
Yeah.
Both scenes started out as being independent producers making their own stuff, kind of like creator-owned comics. But then indie seems to take on this other secondary meaning of progressive in scare quotes or whatever else. It becomes something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just supposed to be, indie is really just supposed to be a couple people working on whatever it is, trying to make a product that don't have the support of the bigger companies. Everything starts out as indie to begin with.
Once again, I have to defer to Total Biscuit. Indie is a business model. It's not a genre. Actually, I don't think he ever actually said it in those. Yeah, I don't think he said it in those words. Well, actually, he did say it in those words. So, before we wrap up, I did want to swing back around to RPGNet about your complaints about that forum. What is RPGNet's clout exactly, and why is it a big deal that this forum is acting the way it is?
It's not as big as it used to be, but it's still a key player. We don't really have an RPG press anymore. We don't have a magazine.
Yeah.
We've got a few websites, and lots of the people on them do great work, but they just don't have the audience. There's no central place. So even though it's diminishing in importance, RPGNet is still probably the central hub for getting word out there about some product that you do. So if you're banned, then obviously you can't directly post. You have to get someone else to do it for you, or employ someone to do publicity or whatever. And so that's a problem. It's also a problem because all conversation, if it becomes even slightly argumentative, gets stopped. You just can't have. When you cut out contentious discussion, you're also cutting out productive discussion, and it's just such a repressive atmosphere. You can't have an impassioned debate there. So it's become functionally useless unless you're part of the chorus.
Mm-hmm. Are there is this only RPGNet that suffers these problems, or is it other websites that also other forums where people meet for tabletop discussions where basically moderators have taken the role of gatekeepers?
There's always drama across all sorts of different forums. It isn't necessarily just tabletop, but when it's the big one that people, when it's the central hub, it spawns bigger problems. Because that's representative of the mass, basically. So it's going to be like, yeah.
Sorry, there's other big forums like the RPG site or EN World. They have their own issues as well. The culture varies from site to site, but with it being such a big site, it having such a repressive and difficult culture, a political monoculture, really, that becomes a problem.
Definitely. Is there a new website that you think would be a positive alternative to RPGNet?
I don't know about positive alternative. I think the answer is to find blogs of people that you don't necessarily agree with, but you respect and you understand their taste and so on. So blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, that sort of thing. I don't think forums are going to be remotely useful for much longer. And
I also agree with that, like almost grassroots sort of organizations.
Make yourself a network of good people on social networks and recommend stuff to each other. Word of mouth is the way to go, I think.
Sounds good. I think that we are going to wrap up now. I know James has to go, so before we leave, is there anything any of you would like to promote? Sour, I know you have you've been promoting your channel lately.
Yeah, I've been promoting my channel. It's Sour Grape. I basically play a lot of art games. Art games being games with a political message attached to them because they're fun, right?
I could make better.
Of course you can. We need to still do that video, by the way, Gwen.
Just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, so I talk about that. Sometimes I talk about politics. Sometimes I talk about North Korea and how they suck. It's pretty fun. So, yeah.
North Korea is full of cis white males. Just letting you know, that's why it's bad.
Yeah, they couldn't launch a satellite either. So.
Just. Also,
talking of satellites. Oh wait.
Wrong stream.
Shots fired. Anyway, James, any sites you'd like to promote?
Just if you want to find any of my stuff for either of the companies I work for, just Google Postmortem Studios or Chronicle City. You'll find stuff which you should then buy. Chill
away. Gwen or Serps?
Gwen can go. I'm not doing anything anymore.
Okay.
Lies.
I don't do anything.
Yeah, he doesn't even do anyone here, so, why is he even around? Oh, there it is. Hey, he doesn't do anything. I'm just letting them be known that there's no sex for favorites.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how the rest of you got into this stream.
All right. Well, good night, folks. What else there is to know? I think this wraps up the show. I think we had a great discussion today, and I thank everyone for coming on, and I thank all of you for watching. And that's it. Have a good night or good day. Oh, it's not even nighttime. I'm sorry. I am not used to doing the show this early. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.